a slight delay there. Yeah,
Sorry,
sorry,
it's just
apologies.
recording there now. Sorry about that. There you go.
Yes, apologies for the slight delay there. We've had a few tech issues, but hopefully all resolved now. So good afternoon. Welcome to Review and Republish Your DSPT. My name is Alan Wilmot, and I'll be running through the session this afternoon on behalf of the Better Security, Better Care team. And we'll just wait for a couple of seconds just to make sure that everyone's logged on okay, and then we'll run through the program and hopefully answer your questions as we go through. Okay, so let's make a start then. Before we start, just a few housekeeping points. I'm aware that some of you may not be the people that have published your DSPT in the past, so we'll just clarify a few points as we go through. So this session is for care providers who have already published their DSPT in the past. All of you are on mute and can't be seen. And with regard to the questions and answers that you might have as we work through, could we ask you to use the Q&A function to ask your questions rather than the chat? And if you're listening to us on a phone, then what you need to do is to tap the screen to see the controls, choose more, and then Q&A. Any questions that we do have that we find that we can't answer immediately, we will come back to you if you add your email to the Q&A that you enter. In terms of timing for the session this afternoon, it will last no longer than 1 hour, and you will be getting access to the presentation, including all the links that we'll be referencing as we work through. So let's crack on then. But prior to looking at the agenda for the session, we'd just be really grateful if you could complete this quick poll for us. We'd like you to answer these 4 questions, just in terms of what level is your organization currently at on the DSPT? Have you personally used the DSPT before? Are you single site or multi-site? And where did you hear about the webinar that you're attending this afternoon? So I'll give you a few moments just to click on the appropriate answers through those questions there, and then we'll get a feel for where people are at from your responses. So once you've all answered those, we can then see who's joined us this afternoon. So we've got 80% of you that are already registered, excellent, and 20% of you who aren't. So if you do have any particular questions because you haven't looked at the DSPT previously, please, as I say, put that in the Q&A. 60% of you have started to complete the DSPT, and 40% of you don't know, which is interesting. So how would you describe your organization? So 80% of you single service and 20% multi-site group. So that's really helpful in terms of understanding where we need to be going this afternoon. So thank you for that. Let's move on then into the session per se and have a look at the agenda. So what are we going to be covering? Well, we're going to start with logging into your DSPT. Well, we'll be looking at the process there in terms of just accessing the questions in order to republish. We'll be looking at how you will need to review your DSPT, your previous entry, and to check that the questions have carried across and whether or not you need to make amendments, before moving on to look at what's changed within the DSPT itself. Every year they do tend to make a few changes to reflect what's changed in the sector, etc. So we'll just be highlighting what's different this year. And then we'll move into how you republish your DSPT, which is the important bit of the afternoon, and then reviewing some top tips in terms of how to get the best out of your DSPT before looking at the support that's available, both in terms of completing the DSPT and in wider data protection aspects. And we'll have an opportunity for formal questions before we then look at the next steps and moving forward. So let's start by looking at the process for the DSPT, what you have to do in order to republish. So the first point I would want to make is that you are already more than halfway there, having previously published the DSPT. And if that's the case, then the process, as we can see here, is relatively straightforward. The first thing you need to do, obviously, is to log in. And I'll be working through how you actually go about that in a moment. And then, as I mentioned, you will need to then review and update your existing answers because they should have transported across to your latest view of the DSPT. And the task is to complete all of the mandatory questions. It's quite important that if you've only looked at the social care view on the DSPT previously, when you go log in to republish your DSPT, it will look different. And it will show all of the questions that apply to all of the sectors that are required to complete DSPT. So for a social care provider, you only need to complete the mandatory questions. And then obviously, if you're republishing, you will need to republish by the 30th of June. But the main message is keep your DSPT up to date. You can actually log into the DSPT at any point and update and review, but you will need to republish at least once a year in order to keep your DSPT current. And if there are any areas that you're not sure of as you work through, there is lots of support available, as we can see here. So working and supporting you throughout this process are the Better Security, Better Care team. And they provide via the Digital Care Hub website all of the resources that are available with that support. All of that is free and official. So it's all supported by the Department of Health and Social Care. It's all supported by the NHS, who do in fact fund and support the whole of the programme. So you can see that there is online guidance and step-by-step films available on all aspects of the DSPT. Then obviously there are the webinars like we've had this afternoon. There are frequently asked questions sections. There are template policies. So if you find that one of the questions in the DSPT prompts you to think about whether or not you've got a policy or whether it's the right policy, etc., there are templates that you can personalize and download from the Digital Care Hub website. There is a helpline. And of course, there are 28 local support partners across England. So in most local authority areas, you will have a team who are there to support you through completing your DSPT and answer questions around data protection and cybersecurity, etc. So let's move on to look at how we can do it. So the first thing, obviously, is to log into the toolkit. And if you've forgotten your login details or don't know them because it wasn't you who completed the DSPT previously, there is, again, the Exeter Help Desk available, and you can contact them on the telephone number that's on screen now, or you can email them at exeter.helpdesk@nhs.net. So any login problems you might experience, there is support available to help you through that. So the login process itself is a fairly standard process. So once you go to the DSPT toolkit.nhs.uk site, on the top right-hand side of the page, there is a login link. And if you click on that, this is what you see. And you can see that it's fairly straightforward. It asks you for the email address, and that's the email address that was registered with the DSPT when the account was established, and it will ask for your password. And again, the password is the one that was set up at the time that the DSPT was registered. So those are the only two things you need to log into your particular organization's DSPT. And so enter those, click on login, and it will take you through to the toolkit. Sorry, can we go back one, please? If you do not know your password because it wasn't you that completed the DSPT, you can see on the right-hand side of the login button, there is a forgot your password option. So if you know the email address that was used, you can click on forgot your password and be able to log in all the same. And I just wanted to mention about logging in with NHS Mail, because if you do log in with NHS Mail, the toolkit will expect you to log in with NHS Mail ongoing. Therefore, should the person that NHS email is attached to leave the organization, it may make the process of logging a bit more complicated in the future because you would have to reset the account. So if we can move forward to look at once you've logged in, what does it look like? Well, if you registered as a single site organization using your ODS code, the V code, then you will see this. And you can see that it has complete your assessment for the appropriate year at the top in the blue banner. And it will also have a progress bar at the top that shows how many of the mandatory questions have been completed already. So that may be completed, or it may show that there are some gaps. If there are gaps, it may well be that the question itself has changed at some point, and therefore you'll need to revisit that question in order to be able to get the progress bar across to the 43 mandatory questions that there are currently, because one of the changes is they've added an additional question. The questions are grouped into 4 sections, staffing and roles, etc. And each of those sections is unique in terms of reflecting a particular aspect of your data and cybersecurity responses. So as I said, this is what a single site assessment looks like. If you had previously published using an HQ code, it would look slightly different. It would look like the screen is showing at the moment. And you can see that there is a slight difference in that above the progress bar, it states that this is an HQ assessment, and publishing this will publish for all selected branches, assuming you tick them. So there is a view branches tab there, which if you click on that, it will open up all of the branches that are linked to this HQ assessment. And if you tick those at the point of publishing, it will then publish on behalf of the whole organization. So you can choose your sites. So you can tick the ones you want to publish on behalf of and the ones that you don't. So that's the only difference in terms of a single site view and an HQ site view. All of the questions are identical for both of those particular views. So the amount of work that you will need to do will also depend on what level you published at previously. So if you were published previously at approaching standards, then you will need to publish this time at standards met, because you can only publish at approaching standards once. So there's a bit more work involved if you previously published at approaching standards. So the task is to review and update your existing answers, complete all the remaining mandatory questions to reach standards met, and remember that you only need to respond to the mandatory question. So if there isn't mandatory written on the right-hand side of the question, you can leave it. You don't need to do anything with it. If you published last time at standards met, your task is simply to review the responses that are in the toolkit, make sure they're still current and relevant, and then click on save. If you published at standards exceeded, again, the process is simply to review and update your existing answers. Publishing at standards exceeded simply means that you have answered more than just the mandatory questions, because there are some that some organizations can respond to appropriately. So let's have a look at a quick summary of the key points. So when you're reviewing, updating and answering your questions, what you need to do is to check that the previous answers are still there. Remember that it may look different to what you've seen before, so you don't need to panic about that. It does include all of the DSPT questions that you've seen previously, but it includes additional questions. And bear in mind that you only need to answer the mandatory ones. So I mentioned earlier that the DSPT year runs June to June, and each year that the team review what questions need to be to reflect current requirements, etc. So there can be changes. Last year, there were some changes made to the DSPT, so you may not have seen them yet. So last year, they introduced changes to the multi-site publishing screen. So they added a screen so that if you weren't flagged as an HQ previously, but you added on publications on behalf of other sites in your last publication, then you'll see this screen appear, and it gives you the opportunity to review what services are linked to your particular services. So the existing functionality with HQ and other sites is unchanged. And when a non-HQ organization that's had sites added to their last publication selects publish assessment, this is when this screen would pop up for you just to check that you're publishing on behalf of the appropriate organizations linked to your HQ publication. Other changes that came through are that they've added a mandatory question. So that's why it's changed from 42 to 43. And this particular question is looking at multi-factor authentication in order to reflect the increased and enhanced risk in terms of threats to online, etc. So it's recognizing that multi-factor authentication is one of the most effective ways to protect data and accounts from unauthorized access. So it's about building your resilience to cyber threats, etc. And it states that you should consider all the systems that can be accessed from the internet. So that includes email, digital social care record, cloud-based or online systems, and ensure that you've thought about what is appropriate for your organization. So the reason they've done this is because multi-factor authentication is a way to make your online accounts safer. And what it does is add an extra step to the logging in process. Usually it's a text message, email code, fingerprint, or authenticator app, such as Microsoft Authenticator. And you will probably be familiar with the process because you've probably done it when you use online banking. So it's an attempt to try and ensure that we're not at risk from the enhanced threats to our online work, etc. So it ensures we keep us all safe by allowing people that only people that should have access do have access. Okay, so what steps do you need to take in order to be able to work with this? Well, the first thing to do is to review your current systems and speak with your suppliers in terms of whether or not multi-factor authentication is available on the system. And you also need to be identifying any potential issues, whether or not staff share devices, logins, etc. Because obviously, once we move to MFA, that won't be feasible, and it's terrible practice in terms of data protection anyway. You need to identify where implementing AFA might not be appropriate. So if you've already got other significant controls in place in order to keep everything secure, we don't need to make things more complicated. And it's about deciding on your organization's balance of security versus usability. So what works for our organization and what keeps us safe, and getting that balance right. So you also need to be noting any systems that don't have multi-factor authentication at a senior level in your organization. So you need to make them aware of that and the justification for not having multi-factor authentication. So it's about ensuring that the people who have responsibility for your data security and protection understand what you've got in place and why you've got that in place. So in summary on MFA, it is that balance between security and usability that's really important. So it's important not to go overboard, because too many layers would mean that people will either stop using your systems or find ways around it. So identify the appropriate level of security for each system you use based on the sensitivity of the information that's within that system. It's also about the usability and your appetite for risk as an organization. If you're prepared to take the risk, it's up to you, but it's about justifying why you've decided that. So where appropriate, MFA should be implemented for all individual logins to the systems. And if you need support available to work through that or to help to understand what you need to do, there is the support available, as we've already mentioned. So there are your LSO, your local support organizations. Software suppliers will be able to talk through this with you, and your IT suppliers will be very familiar with MFA and what works and what doesn't work within your setting, etc. So having looked at, reviewed, and responded to your DSPT as it existed when you logged in, you should then be able to be in a position to republish your DSPT. So let's have another look at what the process is. So you need to log in, you need to review and update your existing answers. complete all the mandatory questions. So if you published previously at approaching standards, you've got a few extra ones to do. If you published previously at standards met, then it's just reviewing and checking that they still reflect the reality in your organization, and publish by the 30th of June this year. So a quick reminder of how all this works. So when you've logged in, you'll see the questions. Again, only answer the questions marked mandatory to publish at standards met. Obviously, of course, if there are other questions that aren't marked mandatory that you feel you can respond to appropriately, that may help you to reach standards exceeded. But you only need to answer the mandatory questions that are on where it's marked mandatory on the right-hand side of the blue text. Once you've responded to a question, you'll see the word completed appear next to that question. And on this particular screen, you can see that the fourth question isn't mandatory, so you can leave that alone. In order to respond to the question and review your previous responses, if you click on the blue text, that will open up the tooltip and the response boxes for the question. So you can see here that this particular question, 411, asks, does your organization have an up-to-date record of staff and volunteers if you have them in their roles? That's the bold text is the question. The smaller text underneath is the tooltip that gives you advice and guidance in terms of what this is talking about and what you might need to do in relation to the question. This particular question you can see is a tick box response. So up on the top left-hand side next to the start of the question is an orange box. All you need to do, if you are confident that you are responding affirmatively to the question, is tick the box. However, I will just mention the comments box because comments can be really useful, especially for your colleagues and future publications. So if, for example, in this question, you do have an up-to-date record of staff, you might want to pop in the comments box there where that is and where it can be accessed. So if it's not you completing the DSPT in the future, somebody else can look at your comments, find the document and confirm in the future that the list is there and it's up to date, etc. Having completed all that, all you would need to do is click on Save. So you can see an example here of someone who's written in the comments box. So do you have the record? Yes. Comments, staff and volunteer registered are contained in the HR files and electronic versions, which are saved on Google Drive, Portable D. So it's about enabling future involvement with the DSPT to be able to ensure that people are aware of what was entered previously and where things were stored previously. So let's have a look at the process once again. So it's login, review, complete mandatory questions, published by the 30th of June. So if you want to keep your DSPT up to date, again, just to remind you, you can log in at any stage. So for example, if you shifted from paper care records to digital care records, you may want to update some of the questions within the DSPT on an ongoing basis. So you can log in as often as you like or as often as is necessary, so long as you publish by the 30th of June. So having completed all of your responses, and it's got completed next to all of the mandatory questions, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page and you will see the blue box that says Publish Assessment. So all 43 mandatory questions have been completed, shows completed next to them. Click on Publish Assessment, and bearing in mind that the only thing that's going to be published is your status of the DSPT. So what level you've published at and the date that it was published, not what you've written within the questions, so not your full report. If you're publishing on behalf of an HQ quarters, a headquarters publication, then again, you need to view the branches in order to check that all of the branches you want included are included. So just a reminder that in order to view the branches, it's above the progress bar at the top of the page, and click on View Branches, and the drop-down box will show all of the services linked to that HQ code. And it's important that you check that all of those branches have the same policies and procedures, IT systems, and data security arrangements. If that is the case, then you can publish on behalf of all the TIC sites within that view. If, however, you find that it won't allow you to publish and it takes you to a screen that looks like this, it means that there are some issues with the questions that are identified in red. So for some reason, these 5 questions aren't showing as completed appropriately. So in order to check what the problem is, if you just click on the red text in the box, it will take you through to that question and you can remedy what the problem is. Common problems are either you've forgotten to click on save, or you may have entered your response instead of the text box in the comments box. If you type your response in the comments box, the system won't recognize it as a response to the question. So whatever the reason for the issue, click on the red text. It will take you through to the question. Just review the status, make sure you've ticked the box, typed in the text box, etc. And then re-scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on publish. So assuming all of that goes through and you've clicked on publish, they will send you a notification email, and you can see that it will show that you have published at what level, etc. And it also gives a link where anyone who might be interested, so whether that's service users, commissioners, partner organizations, and the public, can see the fact that you have published your DSPT, can see that you are serious about data protection, etc., and that you are current and up to date. So having got your particular notification of publication, let's have a look at a few useful points around using the DSPT and what you can do. So the first thing I want to talk about is the admin function on the DSPT. So when you log into the toolkit, it does have on the toolbar at the top of the page an admin tab. So if you click on the admin tab, it will look like this. So it will give you the option as administrator to manage users of the toolkit. It will give you the option to add, edit evidence, confirm evidence, or to publish the toolkit. However, it's also possible to add members to your toolkit, and all they can do is add and edit evidence. So for example, if you have a particular specialist within your team for IT and you want them to answer the IT questions within the toolkit, you might want to add them as a member so they can edit the evidence within the toolkit, but they can't publish the full toolkit. It's also possible to add viewers who can look at your DSPT entry, but they can't do anything with it. And that might be helpful again for senior managers or owners of the organization just to check what's within the DSPT. It's also possible, once you've published, to access the questions and responses. And therefore, it's possible to download your responses in order to use them within your organization. So you can export your assessment to Excel. And if you see on the right-hand side of the screen there, the arrow is pointing to download assessment. If you click on that, the Excel file will download to your device immediately. It's also possible to save your evidence as a PDF file. So if you click on View Details on the Previous Publications tab, so on the left-hand side, you see the arrow is pointing to View Previous Publications just under the progress bar. That will open up the screen that's on the left-hand side, and it will list all of your previous publications where you can view the details. And if you click on View Details, it will give you the option to download as a PDF. It also, you can see at the bottom arrow there, gives you the opportunity to download the certificate of publication that you can then use to demonstrate your compliance with DSPT, and perhaps put it on the wall next to your CQC registration, etc., etc. So in order to save it as a PDF, if you click Control P, that will give you the opportunity to identify the print option. And if in the box at the top, light blue box at the top, you choose Save as PDF, And then down at the bottom of the page, click on Save. It will enable you to save your PDF file to your computer. However you choose to use the Toolkit publication, it can be quite a powerful way to reinforce all of the principles around data and cybersecurity within your organization, and about the rights of the individuals that you support around the data that they allow you to have access to. So I would suggest it's helpful to make the most of your DSPT. So if you are a multi-site organization, tell your branches, that you've published the DSPT, and if you've downloaded either an Excel or a PDF of your answers, share it with them so that they know what's in the DSPT. It reinforces the importance of data protection and the fact that they need to comply with whatever you've put in your publication. So even if you're a single site organization, tell your registered managers if it's not the registered manager that's been involved. Again, download your certificate to prove your status. And it's well worth adding your DSPT status to your website, or indeed to your privacy statements. Consider adding a link directly through to your DSPT status. And increasingly, organizations where you make bids for funding, etc., or to provide services are requesting that you are DSPT compliant. So tell your commissioners, including the ICSs, tell any NHS partners that you're working with, because the DSPT is the gateway to all of the digital solutions that are coming on stream. And most importantly, tell your IT suppliers so that they're aware of the fact that you are concerned about and that you are genuinely involved in the data protection and cybersecurity aspect of your business. So in terms of making it real, you need to keep your DSPT up to date throughout the year, as I've mentioned a couple of times already. Makes it easier to republish. It also means that you can guarantee that it's up to date and current at all times. Again, ensure that managers and staff understand what is expected of them. It's no good if your DSPT entry says that we do all this stuff, if your staff don't know what that stuff is and that they don't do it. So enable managers to access the information either by a printout of the documents in Excel or PDF version, etc. And again, that can be really useful evidence for CQC, but particularly in relation to the well-led domain, because they are starting to get far more serious about protection of people's personal and confidential data. So please remember that whatever your stage is in terms of your DSPT journey, there is plenty of support available. All of it is free, all of it is expert, and it's all under the Better Security, Better Care umbrella. So just a reminder of the full program of support. There's all the resources on the Digital Care Hub website. It's free and official. There is online guidance with step-by-step films. There's webinars and recordings of the webinars, frequently asked questions, template policies, which I'll come on to in a moment, helpline, and don't forget the tailored support from the people waiting there to provide that support to you. There are also some free training tools available on the website. There's a free e-learning course that's aimed at all frontline staff or anyone else who wants to find out about data protection, working in adult social care services. And I would confirm that it is easily accessible and it's short bite-sized pieces. So it's only 15 to 20 minutes per module. They use relatable case scenario-based case studies. So it's there for all staff and it is free. You don't even need to log on or create an account. It's available to use anytime you want with whoever you want to use it for. And it is compliant with question 321, which asks about the data protection training for your staff. So further guidance is also, there is also an additional training program that's just come on stream for data leads. So for the people with more responsibility for data protection within your organization, there is a brand new training program available. Again, exactly the same format, easily accessible, 15, 20-minute modules, case scenario based. But it is tailored learning this time for those leading on data protection and cybersecurity. We frequently get asked what's available for people with responsibility around data protection. Well, here it is. And it is completely free. Again, no need to create an account or log on. Just go to the website and click on the links and you'll be able to run the training programs. So moving forward to look at the template policies that I said I would refer to earlier. First point I would want to make is that you need to be sure that you tailor these to your service. So whilst they're templates, obviously you need to check that what's within them reflects your reality in your organization. So for approaching standards, the required policies in order to respond to DSPT are listed there. I'm not going to run through them all, but you can look at them when you get a copy of the presentation. And there is a link at the bottom of the slide to download the template policies there. If you're publishing at standards met, there are a few additionally required policies. And again, they're listed there, but I'm not going to run through them in detail. But I just want to highlight the fact that there is also a link, a series of documents that are recommended. They're not necessarily required in order to respond to the DSPT, but they are highly relevant to your response to the data protection and cybersecurity responsibilities, such as your mobile devices assignment form. So if you provide devices to your staff, there is a template to keep track of those, etc., etc. So all really useful resources. And if we then move forward, we can see that there is further guidance outside of the templates and documents available on the Digital Care Hub. So there is guidance on staff and workforce. So if you want to find out what your specific responsibilities might be around data security and protection, there's guidance there. There's guidance for staff. There's guidance on managing software suppliers who process personal data. So if you're in the process of transitioning to digital social care records, there's guidance there to help you, etc. There's guidance on retention and disposal, improving your security, so how to set strong passwords, guidance on using antivirus software, etc. Mobile devices, how do you protect mobile devices from any particular threats? What's the national data opt-out? One of the questions in the toolkit talks about, are you being compliant with the national data opt-out? Need to find out more? It's there available on the Digital Care Hub. So along your journey, if you have any questions, need any support of any kind, contact your local support partner and certainly visit the Digital Care Hub website where you can view all of the stuff that I've been talking about. So if you need to contact for tailored support, there is a link there to take you through to your local support partner. They will offer one-to-one and small group support, that some of them will even come out and see you. They'll be able to answer any questions you might have. And they are connected to the local authorities and the NHS digital leads. So they've got their finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening. If you're a large care provider, you can contact the Digital Care Hub for particular support in terms of the complexities of Publish on behalf of a particularly large care group. And if you have any technical issues with the DSPT, again, there is the Exeter helpline available to support you. So where does that take us? It takes us to what you need to do next. So check out the guidance that we've just been referring to, check out your local support partner. The website is there in terms of the Better Security, Better Care program. And we are also on Twitter and Digital Care Hub. So thank you for following us through there. I'm going to stop the presentation at that point and open it up to any questions that you might have before we move on to just checking out what you thought of the program. So any questions out there from anyone?
No questions, Alan.
Excellent. Okay. In which case, I'll move on to the final poll. And again, same process as at the beginning. 4 questions. What impact has the webinar had on your confidence with reviewing and republishing your DSPT? How likely is it that you will complete the DSPT in the next 3 months? How likely is it that you will contact your LSO? And would you recommend this webinar to a colleague? So again, a couple of minutes just while you tick the appropriate responses, and then we'll have a look to see how well I've done this afternoon. Okay. Are we ready to have a look at the results? Okay, so 75% of you are going away with increased confidence. Excellent. 25% of you, no impact. Excellent. 75% of you say that you will definitely be publishing within the next 3 months, although 25% of you are unsure. And I'm hoping that's about, it may not be up to you at this stage. How likely is it that you'll contact your LSO? Well, 75% of you either very likely or likely, 25% of you unlikely. I can recommend them, and I would highly suggest that if you do have any issues that you do. And would you recommend this webinar to colleagues? 100%. So excellent. My job here is done. So I'll just move on to have a quick look at, no, I won't. What I will do is thank you for being with us this afternoon and wish you all the best for your DSPT in the future. And again, if you need support, it's available in whatever format works for you. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alan.
That's all right.